Hey everybody. This is this week's Glitter Squid recap, and with me I have,
Hey everybody, it's Natanya.
And I'm Andrea.
and I'm Marzia. So this week's episode, we've got quite a bit happening. It's episode 205, is that right?
Yeah.
So this week I think we should just rename the episode Claire Really Sucks.
Yeah.
And so this week we have the reappearance of Jack Randall.
Yes.
We have consequences of Mary last week. Alex was arrested. She does, Claire debates whether or not to get Alex unarrested when Mary hands her a letter, which declares his innocence. She does cautiously do so. The reason why she's cautious about this is because she knows that Mary is fated to marry Jack Randall, and sire Frank's ancestors. So eventually Frank comes out of this deal if Future plays out the way that Future did the first time around. Meanwhile, she's trying to change Future in other directions, but she wants that bit to play out. So she does rescue Alex, but convinces him that he shouldn't marry Mary because she deserves better.
And he's sick. It looks like he's got tuberculosis
And
going on.
he's got TB or something. He's definitely sick, and so she deserves better than this. Meanwhile, she's ruined, so we've already been told that nobody's going to take her. Jack Randall shows up. Jamie wants to challenge him to duel, and Claire convinces him to call it off because she doesn't want him to kill him yet.
1 year.
Right. Yeah, to not kill him yet. And I think that's pretty much the big events that have happened. Did I miss anything?
No, there's a lot of little talking. There was the meeting with Saint-Germain and the continued conversation with Sandringham and how they are going to be buddies so that they can make this deal and get the money over.
Oh, that's right.
For Prince Charlie's got this little underhanded thing that the working people do, which I loved his little don't bother me with the details. This is disgusting. You work it out among yourselves. And so Jamie's trying to play both of those things as well. And then there's Jamie inspecting horses and Sandringham inspecting Jamie. So a little bit of weirdness there, but it was a very vignetted episode. It was not as tight, I think, as last week's at all. And we did have more discussion about the La Dame Blanche as well, so we figure out why. Yes. That's an early conversation, but it was kind of on the boring side. And if it's just me, every time Claire sits there rubbing her belly, I feel like she looks like she's about to just calf the baby right there. She just looks so miserable and uninterested or in pain or I don't know what it is, but it's like.
How far along is she in her pregnancy now?
Gosh, she's got to be 6 months.
I would think just from belly bump size, but Hollywood doesn't always get that right. That 6 months she looks about that long.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I've said before that I feel like pregnant Claire is not as strong and vital and as interesting. Like it really feels like taking her out of Scotland has taken the power out of her character. I mean, she's still, doing the good deeds at the hospital, but I don't know, I guess we're meant to feel her struggle right now. I mean, that was why she went to the hospital initially, to, figure out what her place is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not feeling like she's settled.
Mm-mm.
And I think they're all fish out of water with this whole intrigue thing, and they're not good at it.
No, they're terrible. They don't have anybody fooled. Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to see that Jamie can play chess at least. Like you think, okay, they've got the raw materials to kind of go, head to head with the French, but it's just such a different. The values are so different that and the etiquette is so different, and it just it doesn't feel like they are that they've really figured out their way. Even they're advancing with this pretty complicated plan with profound implications.
Yeah, and I think there's something to be said too about pulling them out of Scotland and just pull them out of this sort of rugged landscape and kind of the survival feeling that the first season had, which was so neat to see. Someone from the 1940s who's, certainly a tough chick, but not necessarily a wilderness girl, kind of go toe to toe with these Highlanders. But also there was this continued intimacy with Jamie and Claire that we just don't have. They're kind of in completely separate circles. He's getting his thighs bitten by prostitutes while she's planning dinner parties and trying to prevent her friends from being raped. And it's kind of like there's just that they're only, I kind of think of it in terms. I remember my husband and I were first married. We worked totally different times. We never saw each other until our son was born, and then all of a sudden it was weird because we actually saw each other like routinely, and it really does change the dynamic. And so when they are together, they're having these deep discussions and trying to sort of fill in all those spaces, but there's not enough room for passion and discussion and saving the world, and especially when it comes down to the Frank issue.
So something else, if I jump around a little bit, I just want to throw out there, I don't see Jack Randall being attracted to Mary. Like, this is a bridge to cross that I cannot see the other side right now.
Honestly, it would make more sense to me if the path that the future was supposed to take was that she marries Alex, and then Alex dies, and then he marries her out of loyalty.
Right, which
that would make sense.
Right.
And we haven't ruled that out as a possibility here. So why is she manipulating the future and deliberately hurting her friends like this?
Yeah, and especially I think that there's something really dark about the fact that she's willing to have Mary subjected to Jack Randall, this woman who's already just been raped, and she's like, oh, by the way, I want you to, we're going to just kind of steer you in this direction of this man who we know destroyed somebody. I think that was just kind of uncomfortable, and I don't remember the books. I don't remember how this kind of works out. I just was not super happy with that Claire is willing in this time, and even, she doesn't know she's ever going to come home. It seemed a little out of character that she'd be willing to just throw this young girl who's just been through this horrible situation into a worse situation because she wants her husband to not have never been born.
I mean, it's almost like throwing someone to Ramsay from Game of Thrones.
It totally is.
And she's even more helpless than a Sansa. It doesn't feel, it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't feel like it goes with Claire's character otherwise.
Yeah,
I think she would be more protective.
I kind of want Mary to have some horrible flaw so that it's like worth it, like maybe she did something that really pissed Claire off, or she's actually totally duplicitous and planned the whole thing. It just doesn't seem like she seems like one of the most innocent characters in the whole series so far.
I mean, unless she gets used as like a mask, so that some sort of agreement is made where she could be with the brother and just look like she's married to Alex, and then Jack Randall, and then he can go, be true to his sexuality, which seems to err on the side of men, not women. I mean,
or maybe just Jamie. I almost wonder, and it was interesting because I read an interview with the actor, and he was saying that, especially in that day and age, that there weren't the kind of lines that we have now, and so he was kind of trying to interpret it in terms of the 18th century, but more that he's so attracted to Jamie because he was something he could not break, and he's become completely obsessed with this person beyond the trappings of male, female, whatever. It's just this one person is all-consuming of his desire because he sees in him someone he can't destroy.
I can see that. I mean, the reaction he has when he sees Claire, and he turns it into this cosmic event. So clearly Claire and that they are larger than life in his mind. I think the pair of them, but yeah, certainly Mr. Claire. Suddenly, but yeah, I'm not feeling. I didn't see the episode when you guys were writing, saying you were screaming at the television. So every time something happened, I thought, is this the time they were screaming at the television? Or maybe it's this time. So, but like to me, I want to yell at the writers for that. It just doesn't feel authentic
Yeah.
to her.
And I can't, the details are a little bit fuzzy, but I don't remember that specifically being in the book. And I think that they changed it for this show because I think I remember in the book that it just went down that Alex and Mary were both sent away and disgraced and both went back to London in separate ways. Alex fired and Mary back to who knows where to catch up with later. So I think that they did write it in as a manipulation thing, and I really hope that they redeem her later because it makes her completely unlikable.
And it also, I mean, to follow it up with the conversation she had with Jamie, it seems like one too many machinations on her part. I mean, and when he's like, do you know you're asking me to do this to this man who made me want to kill myself, who invaded me, this person that you just said like 2 scenes ago that you love beyond measure. I really was not feeling for Claire at all. I was really feeling for Jamie and feeling like he was absolutely right in this. And it seemed like the cowardly, manipulative way to get him to agree by saying, you owe me a debt. I've saved your life twice. And I didn't blame him for being like, don't touch me, don't come near me. I just don't, I think what I'm having a hard time with is because we haven't really had any Frank flashbacks since the first episode. We really don't know Frank anymore. And he's kind of fading and fading and fading from our minds. And it seems just crazy that she's putting him so far ahead that she's willing to sacrifice Mary and to prevent. And I don't think Jamie should go out and kill him. That's probably stupid. But that she's preventing him from doing, this one thing that he wants to do at all. And a year seems, they're going to have a baby at this point in a year. It's like.
Yeah. Go get yourself killed then. Well, and that first episode, it didn't seem when Claire was reintroduced into the 40s. It didn't seem. Ooh, we've lost Natanya.
Some wine went the wrong way, I think.
Well, that's a telling image. But it didn't look like Claire was really enjoying her time with Frank. Like, it didn't look like she liked him at all. So it surprises me that back in France, that she is that concerned about his well-being. And there's a certain amount of like pride, like maybe too much pride in thinking I can, through my action, change and control all of this. It seems, at best, it makes her unlikable. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that in the book that she persuaded him not to duel Jack because dueling was illegal and he would be killed.
Right.
That's a far more compelling
which seems
reason.
Exactly. Don't do that. I don't want you to get killed for him.
And they honestly, they could have. I feel like they could have played that up. That was like a sub bullet.
Yeah, right.
Argument.
You will get your shot. Just wait for the right opportunity. And dueling is not it.
Yeah, because I don't think Jamie would be opposed to that. I mean, I think he'd want to have it well planned, and I don't know. I think the best shot scene was the scene where Jamie sort of comes up behind them. And that was kind of beautiful tension.
Yes.
And I love that. I love that whole scene with the king and everything, and sort of the showing that Claire has this power because she knows people in the court much better than Jack Randall does. And he's kind of being made fun of for being the sort of English dragon.
Exactly. It was a whole dance for me, monkey dance.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, good Lord, her dress almost redeemed the whole episode for me.
Agreed.
Because that was one of the most beautiful dresses I've ever seen on television. I mean, if I had no end to budget and cosplay, that would be being made currently right now, because that was like everything I find beautiful in French fashion, plus this just incredible embroidery in the garden that they're out there in was just absolutely incredible. But I also felt that, I forget the name of Jamie's, his cousin, who she was kind of talking with, who kind of led her over to Jack Randall. I thought there was going to be something more happening there, but there really wasn't. It was like, oh, I'll go get him for you. It was like, what?
It was like, don't forget about me. Let us walk together, and then I will.
But I know Jamie the way you don't know him. It was like when he was wild and free, and I was like, also you're 14, so like how does this even work? Yeah, so a little bit confusing there. And yeah, I mean, just I think it was a little bit of a disappointment episode. I talked last time about my like reaching for my phone. I found that quite a few times I was like, okay, what's happened on Facebook? Because I was just not the intensity that we had like every episode last season. It's just has not been as even so far. And I'm wondering how long they're gonna draw this out. I remember enough from the books that there's not that much. Well, anyway. I'm just wondering how long this is going to go.
Spoilers.
Yeah, not quite spoilers, but also don't try to talk and drink wine at the same time, as I just learned. If you wonder why I just vanished, because I almost threw up because I was coughing so much. Sorry about that. Just
Live theater.
Oh.
Well, I was thinking with regard to that last scene, what makes the show compelling is for me, has been how they keep coming together as a couple, and have suffered these horrifying traumas, each of them. I mean, she's been plucked out of the world she knows, thrown into someplace else, and he, and Jamie had, the rape with Jack Randall, and then, in the middle of all of that, their personal stuff, then there's the, their world view is also in flux and power struggles. And so part of what I found compelling about that first season was them finding a way to come back to each other. There was a scene in the first episode where, he basically says, he just looks at her and goes, I forgive you. I believe you. I forgive you. And those moments were like glue for me. And I'm not feeling that this episode. Yeah. And it could certainly be a reflection of, like, over the course of time, relationships can, it feels like they're eroding. Their partnership is eroding. And so part of what is making me continue to watch is the hope that they get back to where they were.
Right. Because they were finally sleeping together again. And now Jamie doesn't want to touch her.
She's messed that up. Like,
and I really don't blame them. That's just.
Well, it's almost like opening up a traumatic wound.
It is.
That's basically what she did, and it was such a power play. And his traumatic wound was, and the ultimate abuse of power.
Yeah.
And so, I think that it hit him on multiple levels.
Yeah, and it's one of those things we've talked a lot about is sort of book Jamie versus show Jamie. And because there was such a focus on his trauma, there was such a focus on the rehabilitation, it took a lot longer in the show than it did in the books for him to, get back into bed with her and to have intimate relations, because he was pretty much he had, a day where he was and then he was okay, in the books. But I think it's kind of a misstep to have her choose this as the point. I really think it would have been more effective to use his life and to plead with him and say, hey, I can't be here. If anything happens to you, I'm completely alone. You're the only one that knows, the only one that understands. Right. Not a matter of, if you do this, then Frank won't live. Because that just felt...
Well, and he's like, bonus, win-win. I don't want Frank to win, because he's, what's in it for him? It doesn't make sense. I mean, the only thing that I could think was if Frank doesn't exist, then she doesn't marry Frank, and she doesn't go to Scotland for a honeymoon, and doesn't get sent back in time. But she didn't make that argument either.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem. I mean, to be total nerd, I don't see this as being like one single timeline. I mean, it feels like the kind of thing that, Imho, if you're already going in there and messing things up without actually fixing it, either it's a fixed point that doesn't change, right? One of these Doctor Who kind of like, there's just points you can't change,
right?
Or it's rippling off into like thousands of fractal universes that you just don't even know, right? So I don't know. Maybe they're not thinking about it in those terms, but I kind of feel like she's putting way too much of an onus on stopping Culloden, but also making sure that Frank is born. And I'm kind of like, can you have both things here?
Yeah, I think you can choose one.
Yeah.
Prioritize.
I agree.
And also, she knows that Jack was there, so yeah. So if she's using the points of history that she knows happens,
mm-hmm.
yeah, it all bothers me with that.
This whole thing isn't holding water for me. I mean, why does she think that she knows the only way for things to turn out?
And why is she judging that this future is the best future? How does she know that it wouldn't cause a completely different disaster?
Right.
If Scotland didn't fall, then it would lead to, a great plague or worse predicament somehow down the line.
Yep. Oh, lots of questions. And fewer answers.
One thing that we did have a comment pointing out that they have changed from the books, which is probably for the better, is that there are a lot fewer spankings.
Yes.
I thank them for updating that, and we saw that last season a little bit. In the last season, the reason that Jamie gave for no longer beating Claire is that he'd learned a better way. Whereas in the book, he just had promised her he wouldn't do it.
Right.
There was no, I'm enlightened, maybe there's an alternative. It was, Claire said, I'll kill you if you do, and he said, okay.
You're right, you're speaking my language, lady.
I mean, and I think, and I feel like they do treat, just in general, the sexual intimacy different in the show. And the show's been praised pretty universally for really, Andrea, we talked last time about the lack of the male gaze in some of their sex scenes. You're not just cued in on Claire. And we're so used to seeing sex portrayed through the eyes of the dude or voyeur dude that you don't get these nice shots. But you do. Jamie is a very desirable person, and he's filmed in such a way. But I think that if they had gone, because I mean, there's always sexual undertones to the spanking and the hitting, and you kind of like, you don't want to go into 50 Shades territory, right? It's just, and I think that that's the sort of the romancy part of the books that does not translate as well. Just a little bit of kink, not a whole lot, but just enough to make people kind of go, and I'm glad that they haven't. I think it doesn't translate.
I was going to say it's a hard translation, and not to. I'm going to totally derail the conversation here. I just finished Ghost Set a Watchman, and at the end there is a scene with grown-up Scout and her uncle, and he. So this is taking place in the 50s, and she's furious because it feels like her whole family is racist, and she's been in New York, and she is so profoundly disappointed by the way they seem to be evolving without her there, and she's going to leave, and she's going to leave, and she's never going to come back. And her uncle, who's like 50 years older than she is, just hauls off and smacks her across the face. And it was a really and then they come together beautifully, and so it made me think, like, is that ever the uncle's point in that bit was, I need to stop her. I need to just like lay her flat, because if she leaves, she's never going to come back. So, like, for however uncomfortable that scene was with Jamie, like, I've gone back to it a couple times and gone, did he have any other choice? Like, what did it, like, is there any redemption for that? Because it was horrible. When he just started spanking her, it was just such an abuse of power. But I would argue that maybe what she did to him in this episode is a similar level of an abuse of power.
Yeah.
And I kept on going back to that scene, going like, was that to make him human and not perfect, and make it like, was that supposed to give him more dimension? Because it was a really disturbing. Because they were, so intimate, like and they really showed it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not looking for more spanking in my literature, so I'd be okay if they kept it to a minimum. I don't even know how to decode it. Mm-hmm. Like, it doesn't. I can understand some people think, oh, maybe sexy kinky, but like it's not. It didn't resonate that with me. So it's almost just like, I don't know, something like a little bit obscene thrown into this enjoyable thing that you're watching. Although I guess, if you look at ads from the 50s, women were getting spanked all over the place in ads, and it was adorable. So I guess it could have been happening in Scotland 200 years before then.
Well, in the book, there's quite a lot of talking about, beating kids too, because common form of discipline, and I tend to think that it probably wasn't that uncommon in the 40s. So it probably would not have had quite the same reaction. So I'm glad that they skipped that over too.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking, am I just like, is this past its due date? Like, so that it's not making sense to me, like it's not resonating in any way.
Well, yeah, and I would argue that even since the books were published in the 90s, I mean, this book came out, was it 93? I mean, we've changed a lot. I mean, I was smacked a heck of a lot more than I've ever spanked my kids. And like,
right.
The times that I have raised a hand have been because I've been put to my app, like it's for me, it's not for them. And it's like, right. And it's not, it's infrequent, and it's like a pop on the butt, and it doesn't ever help anything. But as a kid, I mean, I had a neighbor who got the belt multiple times a week, and no one reported their father to the social service. That was just what you did. And my dad was like outright, beat on the head by his dad, and that was considered what you did. And I think that we've changed enough, and now, of course, I mean, I know, Andrea, you know this, but there's a lot of research to show that physical abuse, even things like spankings, can actually wreak all kinds of mental health issues on children. So, I think it is one of those things that we are learning, that this may feel like something that has been okay for time out of mind, but we're learning better to think beyond sort of that impulse, and it is uncomfortable, and to bring it in as much as it may have been in the books, I think would be a detriment to the audience. It's also, I was thinking in terms of writing, when you're trying to get emotion across, physical pain is very hard to get across in writing, but it can be effective if done right, and it may have been just an attempt to kind of make something you can't see more accessible for a reading audience. We could call Diana up and ask. We could get her on the show.
Well, so what other points did we want to talk about?
Oh, the spoons. We didn't talk about the spoons.
Oh, I loved the spoons.
The spoons were lovely. That was a sweet moment. And that made Claire feel like even a bigger jerk.
What did she call them? Apostle spoons?
Yeah, they were
the 12 apostles.
Yeah, there were 12 spoons, so they were apostle spoons.
Yeah. And that was such a cool moment for me, because spoons are very important in the Middle Ages. Like, you saw, there's lots of spoons in burial grounds and things like that. And I did a whole paper at one point about the baptism spoons that were found at Sutton Hoo. And so it's a very, very old tradition. Spoons were very, very important, and silver spoons even more so. And it was one of those cool moments, too, that you could tell she was like, cool. But, for him, this really meant something important. I like those moments when you kind of have the clashing of time a little bit more with them, because sometimes they do feel very modern. But Jamie, as modern as he is for his time, is still, an 18th century Scot.
And also a lord with a long family history, So I like the shout out to his sister, I liked her character.
I miss
so
Jenny.
I was glad to
Yeah.
hear that she seems to be doing well. That was a little, don't forget about me. I liked, yeah, so I liked that whole scene. I don't know if it has any significance beyond just like
Yeah.
a warm moment, because they don't have as many of them this season.
And I don't think it's going to be getting better soon.
No.
I think the more pregnant that she gets, the more that we're going to get to wherever this is going, and judging from her state in the future, it's probably not a good place.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
and I would think that pacing wise, we'd probably get there next week, but I don't know. They might stretch it out another 2 episodes, but I'm thinking that's probably next week is what we're going to find.
And if they do like a mid-season break too, we're kind of heading toward a mid-season finale kind of thing. So interesting.
Although actually I would say probably a better mid-season finale would be to leave France. Not to spoil anything.
Yes.
But I think that's probably a more dramatic point. So yeah, I think we'll get to bad place, worst place, someplace else. It's probably how we'll play out.
I can do that. Cool.
So I mean, I think I've made my points that I wanted to make for this episode. Sometimes there are episodes that just have to, like, they feel a little more choppy because you've got a bunch of threads you're trying to move along, and to a certain degree, that's what this felt like.
Mm-hmm.
With a nice betrayal at the end as a cliffhanger.
Which episode 3 was like that too. We kind of felt that episode 4 redeemed it. So maybe episode 6 will move the dial a little bit more.
So episodes don't suck.
Yeah, and I did notice we did get Jamie both in his sort of beautiful silken, waistcoat, but also he was wearing his kilt again while he was at work. And I do love those set pieces and kind of those moments where Jamie kind of puts his hair back and puts his kilt on, and we've got a little bit more of Murtaugh to it, and that we didn't talk about that, but his sort of feeling like he's failed Jamie, and he kind of vocalized that for the first time that he really screwed things up. And he's like, oh, you were outnumbered, but you can kind of tell even in Jamie's face that it's different between them now. He had thought that he could take whatever was happening, but did not. So, but he's got the baby's banging in the attic, so he's okay.
And I think that probably next week, it's either next week or the week after that, we'll find out what happened. Who these masked men were, because I mean we've got to find out eventually, right?
Yeah. My guess is we probably know them from somewhere, but it's probably not the one that we think we know.
Yeah, it'll always end up being somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, Saint-Germain's eyebrows are just too conspicuous, so he's just always like.
Well, it definitely wasn't him, but it could have been, somebody, one of his minions. Yeah.
Right. Totally. Cool. Well, we have another episode coming up, so.
And hopefully that next week's episode will be awesome. Meanwhile, like our videos, subscribe if you'd like to see more of them. Leave us a comment. If we like your comment, we'll get to it on the air in the next episode, and we should see you all next week.
Until then.